Recorded Books and RB Digital present Among the Enemy, a Shadow Children book by Margaret Peterson Haddix, narrated by John Croft. Chapter 1. Matthias was sound asleep when the population police arrived at Needler School. It was the middle of the night, and Matthias was curled up on his narrow cot beside Percy's, in a room full of narrow cots. It still bothered the boys that Aaliyah couldn't sleep nearby. The cots were the most comfortable beds they'd ever had, but both boys still found themselves jerking awake several times each night, reaching out to protect a little girl who wasn't there. But no instinct, no premonition alerted them when the population police trucks rolled up the school driveway. Matthias and Percy slept through the ominous rumble of the engines, the impatient rapping on the school's front door, the trample of boots in the hall. And then, dozens of flashlights were suddenly blazing in their room, and population police officers were yelling at them, "Up! Up! Your country demands your service." Matthias's life before Needler School had sometimes required instant alertness, even when awakening from deep sleep. So while the other boys in the room sat up groggily or moaned without opening their eyes, "Huh? What's happening?" only Matthias and Percy had the presence of mind to gather up their belongings, to stuff their feet into socks and shoes before the officers herded everyone out of the room. "Think they're getting the girls too?" Percy whispered, as the press of bodies around them moved down the hall. "Don't know," Matthias said miserably. He craned his neck, trying to see over the boys in front of him, but they were all too tall. Anyhow, a line of population police officers stood beyond them, blocking his view of the other wing of Needler School. To distract himself, Matthias crammed a moth-eaten sweater over his head and pulled it down over his pajama top. The sweater was easier to wear than to carry, and it provided some small protection against the chill of the hall. Until the past week, Needler School had had what Matthias viewed as the greatest luxury ever: central heat. But something had happened a week ago, and now the vents no longer breathed heat. The light switches no longer worked. The bathroom faucets no longer delivered water of any kind. The few teachers who hadn't run away wouldn't or couldn't say what had changed. "Want to escape?" Percy asked, so quietly that Matthias had to read his friend's lips rather than relying on his ears to register any sound. "Not without Aaliyah," Matthias whispered back. The other students were wedged around him so tightly, and the population police officers were watching the boys so closely that Matthias would have laughed at anyone else who suggested escape. But Matthias had no doubt that Percy had already worked out a plan, that he could have spirited himself and Matthias out of the crowd without leaving a trace. The mass of bodies reached the school's dining hall, and the population police let the boys stream in. "Sit!" the officers ordered again and again. "Sit!" They seemed to expect unquestioning obedience, single-minded focus on reaching each designated seat. But Matthias dared to turn his head and look around. He wasn't sure whether to be relieved or disappointed when he saw a group of students in nightgowns already sitting on the opposite side of the dining hall. The girls. His heart started to pound when he spotted one small blonde head in particular. "Aaliyah's at the third table from the left," he whispered to Percy, "facing this way." "If we crawl under the tables," Percy began, but it was too late. All the boys were seated now, and the top population police official, the one who had the most decorations on his uniform anyway, stepped up to the podium at the front of the room. "Do you have any food?" he thundered.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.